one of the most entertaining football games, not only of the day, but really of the entire NFL season so far. The Bengals and the Chiefs yesterday, a lot was riding on this game. There was a lot at stake, and Bengals ultimately prevailed 34-31 over the Kansas City Chiefs. They clinched the AFC North and clinched a postseason berth for the first time since 2015. And this was really one of the most entertaining games. It lived up to the billing. There were fireworks, explosiveness offensively. Both quarterbacks were showing out and playing well. And for me, this was a statement win for the Cincinnati Bengals. This would have been a statement win or just a statement game for them, even had they come up a little bit short. But the fact that they actually won, it was the first time all year where the Cincinnati Bengals actually legitimized their standing in the AFC and actually backed up a quality win with another quality win against an AFC opponent. Because earlier in the year, we all fell for this and we all made this mistake. We kept prematurely buying into the Cincinnati Bengals. We kept putting them on this pedestal only for them to crater back to earth the following week and to let us down. We saw it when they had that huge win over the Ravens. They won 41-17, and then they followed that up the next week, losing to the Jets. We saw them destroy the Pittsburgh Steelers for perhaps the largest margin in years in that rivalry. And then they get blown out by the Chargers. It's one thing to lose to the Chargers. It's another thing to lose by 20 at home. So that's what we saw. So it was so difficult to actually buy into the Cincinnati Bengals team, even with all the talent, because just when we would heap these expectations onto them, again, they'd come crashing back to reality. So this was the first time all year that they said, hey, you know what? We're not going to falter this time. We're not going to drop into the well. We're going to stay afloat. And we're actually going to elevate and ascend to an even higher place than most teams had us going before. And now they've won 3 straight games. And as I mentioned, they've clinched the AFC North, which I don't know when the last time they won the AFC North was. I'll have to look it up. But they clinched a postseason berth for the first time since 2015. And here's the interesting thing about the Cincinnati Bengals. And I said this when they drafted Ja'Marr Chase 5th overall in the draft. Everyone knew that it was going to be a slam dunk between the two of them because of the connection and the chemistry that they had at LSU again during that championship year when they went undefeated 15-0. Ja'Marr Chase had accumulated over 1,700 receiving yards, 20 touchdown passes. Even though he hadn't played in a year since then, because he opted out of the season his senior year, you knew that they were going to be a hit because of that connection. Obviously now he's got over 1,400 receiving yards. He's top 4 in the NFL in receiving yards. And yesterday he had 11 catches for 266 yards and 3 touchdowns in one of the most impressive individual performances of the entire NFL season. That's what Ja'Marr Chase did yesterday. The question, though, was never about those two individuals' chemistry and whether they would work. No one had questions about that. The question was, could that be enough? Could that be enough to propel them to relevancy immediately? And those two guys, and listen, I don't want to forget about the playmakers that they have. Reeder, Hubbard, they traded for Eli, or they signed Eli Apple in the offseason, a very good acquisition. They've got Azuma, the tight end. They've got some nice pieces. T. Higgins, there's no question. Tyler Boyd. They've got some really nice pieces here. But those two guys individually have infused a new belief that this team can compete with anyone. And they're already one of the most dynamic 1-2 duos in the entire league. Quarterback, wide receiver duos, they're one of the best already. And again, they've continued to have this wavelength into the NFL, 13 receiving touchdowns for Ja'Marr Chase. And then there's Joe Burrow. in the Joe Burrow factor. And I love the moxie that Joe Burrow plays with. He plays with a certain swagger and a certain confidence that isn't and hasn't been replicated by many since his senior year with LSU, since that championship year. Joe Burrow's just been on a tear. He's turned a new leaf. He's kind of done a complete about face since when he was a recruit at Ohio State, and just plays with this kind of humble arrogance and bravado that permeates the entire locker room. Again, he has instilled all this new confidence in this team that, hey, when we step onto the turf or onto the field with this guy, we're going to be in every single game. We're going to be in every single ball game. And that's hard to infuse that kind of that kind of belief. It's hard to imbue that type of kind of camaraderie with one guy. And obviously Jamar Chase has buffered that feeling as well. But the last two games, this guy has thrown 971 passing yards, 8 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over his last two games. And he wants to be a showman. You see him with the cigar, the victory cigars, and the dancing in the locker room. That's who Joe Burrow is. He's never shied away from it. He's never backed down from expressing publicly who he's always been. And that's an attitude change that the Bengals simply needed to have, that he has come in and provided. And he is a tremendous leader already in his second year. People forget he also tore his ACL midway through his first and rookie season last year. He's followed that up with no hiccups. In fact, he's actually elevated his style of play, and he's still getting sacked just as many times. And the reality is the players love playing for him. But this was a watershed moment for the Cincinnati Bengals, not only because of what it means for them postseason-wise, but what it means for their organization, what it means for their franchise, and the perception that we have of their organization, of this team. This was a team that had the worst record in the NFL just 2 years ago. And they draft Burrow, and they draft Jamar Chase, and all of a sudden, they're 10-6. They're 10-6, and they're in the postseason. And it's an incredible, incredible turnaround. And listen, Zach Taylor used to be a Rams coordinator. He's starting to thrive and flourish in Cincinnati. Good for him. They trailed 28-17 at the half against the Chiefs. And then they outscored them 17-0 in the second half, or 17-3 in the second half. They went on a 17-0 run at one point. And they knocked off the team that was the hottest team in the NFL. They were riding an 8-game win streak. And it was impressive. Now, unfortunately, it was a really impressive home win. Now, unfortunately for the Chiefs, it likely cost them home field advantage throughout the AFC, because now the Tennessee Titans, with their head-to-head win over them, are in sole possession of first place, and they take on the Texans on the road in their season finale. So it's very unlikely that they would lose that game. Not to mention the Chiefs still have to play at the Broncos, which is not an easy place to play at Mile High. It's not an easy place to play at all. So they probably cost themselves home field advantage in the AFC. But again, big shout out to the Bengals. I mean, again, just it's going to be a crazy week 18 in the NFL, but a statement win and a watershed moment for that franchise and for that city. No question about it.